Okay. Hi, Gallatin County. Welcome to our second House District Forum. And thank you for joining us tonight for this important forum. We're doing forums for the two House districts where there is a primary opponent. And so this is prior to the Democratic primary, which will be held on June 2nd. And it is for House District 64 with the candidates Brian Popiel and Josh Seckinger. So welcome to Brian and Josh. And before we introduce them and get going, let's just give a few people a moment to enter the room and get situated. I have already told the candidates this, but I will time them on my cell phone as I did last week. And when we come to time, if they haven't stopped or it looks like they're not stopping, I'm going to wave the red flag, which means clearly stop. And they know that. I hope y'all are well. I hope y'all are staying home and safe and healthy. It's not yet time to go out, and the weather tells us that very loudly and clearly. So yeah, settle in, make another pot of soup, and we're in this for a little bit. And hope you're happy and healthy. And if you need anything, there is a resource page on the Gallatin Democrats website. On that very first page, a list of resources so that you can check for the hours at the food bank or other services, healthcare, etc. Just because we're in a fight for to battle a hidden virus doesn't mean that we shouldn't be healthy and well. And that includes caring for each other too. So please watch out for each other and be well. At this time, I'd like to introduce Allison Roberts, who will give us a bit of a tutorial on how to use Zoom and some of the features. And so if you're not familiar with this, there is, she'll tell us how to operate it.
Thanks, Elizabeth. Hi, everybody. It's great to be here tonight. For everyone who is on the Zoom call, you're an attendee, so we can't see you or hear you, but you can submit questions via the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen, or also via chat. Those come to us and we'll take questions at the end. If you're watching on Facebook Live, you can also submit a question as a comment, and I'll be watching and monitoring for those as well. And we'll try and get questions answered at the end. We are recording, or we will be recording this. I need to hit record. Now we're recording this. But we'll also capture it on Facebook, of course. So we're still learning, but we're getting hopefully better at this, knock on wood. That's the third time I've done that. Hopefully that's okay. If you have any questions, like I said, feel free to submit them through the Q&A or on the chat, either for either candidate or both. All right, I think that's all I've got. Elizabeth, do you want me to put up the poll now?
Put up the poll and tell us how those buttons at the bottom work. You know, the chat buttons are at the bottom of your screen, I believe.
Right.
Yeah,
right.
okay.
Yep. So most, yes. If you're on your computer, you'll see a Q&A button and a chat button. And I'm going to share a quick poll with all of you to ask on Zoom if you live in House District 64 or not. So feel free, you should see that pop up now on your screen so that we know. And then I'll give it just a few minutes and then we can share the results so that we know kind of who's in the room with us tonight. And let's see, a couple more people. All right, I'm going to end this poll and I'm going to share the results on the screen. So there you go. Most people are not in this House district, but that's okay because we're recording and we'll share it out so that constituents can hear from the candidates. There are a couple hand raised, but if you all wouldn't mind asking, sending a question instead of raising your hand, that way we'll just be kind of controlling things a little bit more efficiently on this. So thanks for doing that. Anything else, Elizabeth?
No, I just would like everyone to know that the Gallatin Democrats do not endorse candidates running in the primary election. And so we're just offering voters. And although, you know, this poll that we asked you to fill in tonight doesn't show any voters directly, we all have friends. So let your friends know about these candidates and help them be informed because we all know folks all around town, and you can let them know who's running. And we are sources of information, so you know, be that source. So we don't endorse, we just bring you information, and we're grateful that Brian and Josh have joined us tonight. I will read their biographies and then I'll introduce the candidates. We will then go to opening statements by each of the candidates for 3 minutes, go into a series of questions, and those will be answered in 2-minute segments. When we get to the end of the 2 minutes, my cell phone will buzz, and if they go over, I'll use my red flag. And so with that, let's get going. Okay, so because I'm not that original, and I don't have any better ideas, I'm going in alphabetic order. And Brian wins that with both first and last name. So Brian Popiel is a Montana native, born in Glendive in 1975. His mother was a teacher and his father worked in construction. His earliest memories are those of living in the daylight basement of married student housing at MSU. He graduated from Bozeman High in 1993, and his graduating class was less than half of the size of this year's graduating class. He attended college at Gonzaga University in Spokane, and upon graduating, he returned to Bozeman to pour concrete and bend nails on local construction sites while coaching speech and debate and pursuing a teaching certificate at MSU. He taught high school history for a year, but returned to construction due to teaching position cuts in the district. In 2007, on the cusp of the Great Recession, he started his own construction business, and in 2011, expanded into recycling construction materials. Since then, he's been active in the Southwest Montana Building Industry Association, working to advocate for affordable housing and intelligent growth. Brian has been married to his wife, Sarah, for 18 years. They have 2 kids at Bozeman High. Sienna is a junior and KJ is a freshman. Brian's mom taught special ed for 30 years, and his dad spent his career in construction, most recently in the Bozeman Building Department. They recently retired and moved to Southern Idaho. So welcome, Brian. Thank you. And now Josh. And some of you may remember Josh from the U.S. Senate debate that we hosted in late February. Josh Seckinger chose to make his home in Montana 11 years ago. For the past 6 years, Josh has worked as a fly fishing guide on some of Montana's most precious resources, including the Gallatin, Smith, Matteson, and Yellowstone rivers. Frequent travel and a love of the outdoors helped him learn about Montana, while his engaging and extroverted personality helped him learn about its people. Josh has gained a unique perspective about life in Montana, the needs and wants of everyday working Montanans, and the best path forward for the state, based on years of simply talking, listening, and engaging with the people of the Big Sky country. For Josh, one thing is abundantly clear. Montanans believe we must ensure the last best place stays that way. Welcome to you both. And again, thank you for being here. Brian, let's start with you for the opening statement. And again, so let's set the timers. And you have 3 minutes, so take it away.
All right, thanks, Elizabeth. And thanks to the Gallatin Democrats for hosting this forum. Thanks to Josh for being in the race. I think a couple of good candidates is going to make this a better race, and looking forward to the next couple of months in this. As Elizabeth said in my bio, I run a small construction company, recycling business, and then I also handle government affairs and education programming for the Southwest Montana Building Industry Association. Really got actively involved in local politics about 10 years ago, right about when I started my business. Been involved with studies establishing the appropriate impact fee levels for the city of Bozeman. For the last year, I sat on Bozeman's affordable housing work group. A variety of stakeholders across the community struggled with how do we best address this looming crisis in our community. I've traveled to Helena multiple times over that span to testify on issues like property tax relief and technical changes to the building code. And I want to talk a little bit about education. Education is a really big passion of mine. As Elizabeth mentioned in my introduction, I spent the first 5 years after college coaching speech and debate at Bozeman High. I've stayed involved since I quit that job and moved back into construction. I've remained involved in education, especially with SWMBIA. I was a founding member of the SWMBIA Green Building Committee. We taught an architectural class for master's students at MSU on green building. I teach Taekwondo a couple of days a week when the gyms are open again, or I will when the gyms are open again. And the project I'm probably most proud of is we started up a 501c3 last year to teach construction trade skills to high school students. We were partway through our first house with the Bozeman Field School, doing a tiny house, and before the entire project got shut down due to the pandemic. The takeaway on this is that I've been there at the table on all these issues for the last 10 years. Whether it's affordable housing, impact fees, education, I've been active in this community working on these issues. I got into this race because I was concerned with state policies on growth, on education, protecting our healthcare. Last month, kind of everything revolving around that's really changed. The next legislature is going to have to deal with a massive budget shortfall due to the current recession. We're still operating in the dark as to how much relief the state or our local governments, our schools, our workers are going to need to get out of Washington, D.C. So I'm focused on recalibrating our expectations about what this next legislative session looks like. How are we going to protect the Medicare expansion? How do we fund our schools if the state's $250 or $500 million short in income tax receipts? I don't have the answers to those questions yet because they're all really brand new questions. But I think my experience working with diverse stakeholders based on evidence-driven solutions, going where the data takes us, really makes me the best choice to represent House District 64 in Helena.
Thank you, Brian. Josh, your opening statement, and again, 3 minutes.
Well, thank you, Elizabeth, and thank you to the Gallatin County Democrats for hosting this event tonight, and thank you to Brian for running and making this a more diverse field. I'd like to share a little bit about myself and why I'm running for this seat. I was raised by a single mother, born in Florida, moved to Wisconsin when I was in first grade, and finally settled for the first time in my life in the Gallatin Valley at the age of 23. I, like most in the state, have never made a six-figure salary. I have bounced around from job to job, trying to do more than just get by. I know what it's like to live paycheck to paycheck, to struggle with student loan debt, and to make hard choices with a very limited bank account. I've worked jobs from the oil fields in eastern Montana to the ski hills here in Gallatin County. I've built homes, I've cleaned toilets, I've seeded grass, run bobcats, printed newspapers, and delivered food. For the past 6 years, I've spent my working days on the oars of a drift boat. And for one winter, I worked for a lawyer attempting to organize guides and outfitters to protect the Gallatin River. As much as I love guiding, working class jobs no longer mean financial security like they once did. Last June, I had the great privilege of guiding former Senator Max Baucus and his wife Melody down the Smith River. We spent our days fishing and our nights talking about the issues facing this great nation of ours. Spirited debates occurred nightly under the canvas of a wall tent, or as the senator joined myself and the other guides on the dish line. By the fourth day of that trip, Max and Melody were encouraging me to run for office. And at the time, I entertained the thought, but brushed it aside and focused on getting through the rest of guide season. But as time went on, their words stuck with me. In fact, they haunted me. Over the next several months, I often thought of Max and Melody's encouragement. And in January, after consultation with close friends, family, and people across this community, I decided to launch my first political campaign for Max's old seat. Now, my campaign for United States Senate was rather brief, but extremely enlightening. While I was running, I received a tremendous amount of support to run for this seat, which is not something you want to hear when you're running for Senate. But the more I thought about it, the more it made sense. While I currently live outside of Bozeman, I have lived in Gateway, and other aspects of my life, be they work or play, bring me back to the district constantly. Protecting public lands and waterways is one of my main motivations for seeking this office. It's personal to me and to so many others in this district and across the state. We enjoy the recreational opportunities they provide. We treasure the natural beauty they grace us with. And yes, some of us rely on them to make a living. These rivers and streams, mountains and valleys, forests and fields are inseparable from our way of life and deserve to be protected, managed, and maintained, not only for ourselves, but for all future generations. I look forward to answering questions from Elizabeth and the audience, and thanks to everyone for joining us tonight.
Thank you. If I can just turn off my timer, I'll be okay. Technology, I love it. I love it. I love it. Except when I don't. So I am going to restart my timer and hold on. The next question goes to Josh. We'll alternate back and forth. So Josh, this question goes to you first. What are your qualifications to serve as a representative in the Montana House, including your past public service work?
Thank you for the question, Elizabeth. It's, public service has been something I've always been passionate about. I've never stepped into the political arena as a candidate, but I've always worked behind the scenes or on the sidelines to get other candidates elected. In college, I went to the University of Wisconsin-Madison. I worked for the DCCC and Tammy Baldwin's non-competitive district, canvassing to raise money for competitive districts around the country. I've followed politics closely my entire life. I majored in political science at the University of Wisconsin. It's near and dear to my heart. And I believe that in this particular situation, I'm well qualified. The Montana State Legislature is in a unique position in that it's not a full-time professional legislature. It's a citizen legislature, 90 days every 2 years. We have term limits, unlike a lot of other states. This legislature provides an avenue for people like myself who are passionate about certain issues to get involved in politics at the state level. I believe I provide a fresh face and a new attitude of a younger generation to this state legislature, and I hope to have everyone's support. Thank you.
Thank you. Ryan, same question, please.
Yeah, thanks for the question. I think I touched on most of this in my opening statement. If you've gone down to city commission meetings, Belgrade commission meetings, county commission meetings, the planning coordinating commission meetings, I've been there and I've been involved in all of these discussions on the local level. Mentioned, I've gone up to Helena both as an advocate at the request of officials in Bozeman to talk about property tax relief, replacing some of our property tax system with a tourist tax. Went up to Helena to testify on that just in the last legislative session. Testified before that on the issue of fire sprinklers in residential buildings. So I've been involved in all of these discussions, like I said, for the last 10 years. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. It's curious because I think that you're both poli-sci graduates. Brian, you have a degree in poli-sci too. Yeah.
I do.
Okay, well, curious and interesting. And look where it's led you. Thank you. Okay, the next question goes to Brian first. What are your top priorities in the House, and how are they important to House District 64?
Mentioned this in my opening statement as well. I started this race and probably my most important issue is protecting access to affordable health care. Give the legislature and the governor a really big round of applause for having gotten Medicaid expansion done in the last term. I think that was a huge success for everybody across the state of Montana. And I think looking forward, again, it became really clear to me that protecting what we've accomplished on that and protecting a reasonable full school funding formula that we've got is going to be of critical importance. We are going to be facing down a massive hole in our budget. And so we need to prioritize what it is that we're going to protect. And we're going to have to lay out some values, and where are the places that we're not okay with cutting? Where are the places that we are going to have to do some belt tightening? And how are we going to rearrange the deck chairs in order to get through the next couple of years? You know, we're likely to see this recession go on for at least another 9 to 12 months before we get a vaccine for the coronavirus. And so those are going to be some really challenging issues. And I really want to be sort of a voice of reason, a voice of calm, and protecting some of those big gains that we've made over the last few sessions.
Thank you. Josh, same question. What are your top priorities, and how are these important to HD 64?
Thanks, Elizabeth. So my top 3 priorities in the state legislature will be protecting public lands, access to public lands and public waterways, as I said in my opening statement. It will also be expanding access to adequate, affordable, and quality healthcare to the 92,000 Montanans who currently are not covered by any form of insurance, whether that be through an additional Medicaid expansion or a cost of living adjustment to the Medicaid expansion. $16,400 in Gallatin County is very different from $16,400 in Webo County, just as an example. You know, it's and my third issue is access to high-speed internet. And I lived in Gateway, a half mile off of 191 in a very nice house. And I could not get hardwired internet service at that house. And that's extremely pertinent today with the development of telemedicine in light of the pandemic. And additionally, I've been talking to teachers. And every teacher I've talked to in Gallatin County, the supposed tech hub of Montana, tells me that they have students in their classes who cannot go to school right now because they do not have access to the internet. That, in my mind, is absurd. We need to provide access to high-speed broadband internet to every household in the state, no matter the cost. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay, the next question starts with Josh, and it's this. House District 64 hosts much of Gallatin County's tourism industry with second home owners, resorts, and Yellowstone National Park. Many of the voters in HD 64 are dependent on tourism as small business owners and hourly workers in the service and recreation industries. The COVID-19 pandemic promises to greatly impact our tourism industry. In the legislature, how would you help rebuild Montana's vital tourism industry?
Thanks for that question. I'll just start to address this by saying, as someone who works in the tourism industry, I have watched my employment go up in smoke for at least the next 3 months. I don't know if it's comforting to anybody who's watching this to know that they have a candidate who is filing for unemployment, but you have a candidate who's filing for unemployment. The tourism industry in this state it's our state's #1 industry, and oftentimes the people who work in this industry are underpaid, underemployed, and subject to seasonal closures, and not, none of us have year-round employment. In the legislature, I feel we need to acknowledge tourism on the same level that we acknowledge some of our other large industries in the state, namely agriculture and the extractive industries. The legislature has gone out of their way in the past to protect these industries from recessions, to protect the workers in these industries from financial calamity. And currently, nothing is being done for people in the tourism industry. I would propose a fund set up just for instances like this to help people who are in this industry to get through financial hardships and come out of the other side, maybe not as well off as they were, but not devastated by natural disasters and other unforeseen circumstances. So this hits near and dear to my heart, and I thank you for asking this question, and thank you so much.
Brian, same question. Oh, you're muted.
That's a hard question to answer in a minute. Well,
no, you get 2.
2 minutes. Okay, we have a massive problem facing us in this, and to Josh's point, I think there are going to be a lot of people in the tourism industry that or a lot of businesses in the tourism industry that very well might not open this summer. I started thinking a lot about what West Yellowstone looks like on the 4th of July this year, and how many people have already canceled that family trip to Yellowstone, that family trip to Big Sky, the family trip floating the Gallatin. And the honest answer is that we are not going to the tourism industry is not going to recover until we have a vaccine in place. That this is we are waiting on national solutions to a very local problem. Now, that being said, I think there are some things that we can do with the Montana economy to protect the people that work in those industries. This might be a once-in-a-century pandemic, but 10 years ago, similar issue happened with the construction industry, and everybody in my industry was thrown out of work in short order. 10 years before that, we had terrorists attack the World Trade Center, and that caused a recession, with implications in Montana. And I think the really big issue, the really important issue, is that we need to be talking about resilience. And whether it's small business owners or employees in those industries, we need to have a functioning public health system. People need to have access to health care that is not tied to their jobs. People need to have, even if they're gig workers or independent contractors, and this pandemic's really proven this, they need to have access to unemployment and other safety net programs. And we need to build that resilience into our system. I filed for the PPP today, the Payroll Protection Act. So I think Josh and I are kind of in similar straits going through those programs. And our government doesn't have the ability to process the unemployment claim that Josh is putting in. We don't even know what the numbers are in unemployment. We don't have the ability to process the PPP. So we need to really work on good governance and making sure we can address those problems.
Thank you. Yeah. I mean, they're big and they're gnarly, and yeah, we saw some of this stuff coming, but we don't get a warning. Nature doesn't send us a signal. Brian, this goes to you first. The current legislature is 58 Republicans and 42 Democrats. If a similar composition exists, how will you help the Montana legislature balance the budget this year at a time when more money is needed for medical and mental health support, and the budget is tighter. So 2 minutes. And Brian, we're going to start with you.
Wow, that is a thorny question. Because the money, there's a very good chance the money just doesn't exist absent some sort of backstop from the federal government. You can't squeeze blood from a turnip. So coming to the taxpayers and asking taxpayers for more money is kind of a non-starter. I've been a very vocal advocate for a tourist tax of the kind that West Yellowstone and Big Sky have implemented for the rest of Gallatin County for some time now, but a tourist tax isn't going to solve our problems if we don't have any tourism coming in. And so I think the best I can offer on this is that we need to go into that conversation, like you mentioned, in the best of circumstances, we'll have the branches of government divided between two political parties, and we'll need to articulate a very clear set of values. I think Josh and I have both talked a lot about safety net, about coming up with ways of making sure people keep their access to affordable health care. And we're going to have to really start looking under every rock, looking in every nook and cranny we can. And quite frankly, absent some help from Washington, D.C., to help the state of Montana get through this, we are really going to be struggling. And so really, it's just a matter of identifying the things that you're unwilling to give up on, and then figuring out where the other places that we can afford to scrimp for the next couple of years. And the places that I'm not okay with giving up on are going to be our access to healthcare and our education system.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you so much. Josh, let me reset here. And you take it away, please.
Well, I do agree with Brian that there are going to need to be cuts made or tax increases to offset this situation. I would start with SB 407, which is more commonly known as the Judy Marks tax cuts. There are 1,500 Montanans that make over $500,000 a year. And for some reason, we give them a $48 million tax break every year. Let's start there. That's easy money to get back. So we'll repeal the Marks tax cuts. And then obviously there are going to need to be cuts made elsewhere to none of the social safety net programs. Medicaid expansion stands. WIC stands. Affordable housing vouchers stand. We're going to have to increase taxes on the wealthy, and we'll find money in other areas of the state budget to set aside to offset this situation. But start with the Marks tax cuts for sure. So that's my answer.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, the next question is the Bozeman. We're going back to COVID because it is. I mean, it's what's affecting us most deeply, and it goes back to policy. The Bozeman Chronicle reported this week that a construction site building vacation homes in House District 64 had 6 workers who tested positive for COVID-19. The construction industry is exempt from the stay-at-home order, while nearly every other industry has closed or dramatically altered to keep our communities safe. Do you think that the construction industry should continue to be exempt from the stay-at-home order? And that goes to you, Josh, first.
Thanks for the question, Elizabeth. I saw that article as well, and I know one of the personally, seems to be on the mend fairly well at this point. But 6 cases from one construction site seems entirely avoidable to me, especially considering what the construction site was. a multi-million-dollar lodge in the Spanish Peaks. I'm of the opinion that there are two instances. Let me just say this. I understand the desire to keep people working. I understand the desire to keep the economy flowing. However, it seems absurd to me that this is continuing. The two instances, in my opinion, that construction should be allowed right now are affordable housing projects and infrastructure projects. Everything else should be shut down. That's for the public good, really. So I'm not going to take the full 2 minutes on this. I think it's quite unnecessary for me because I posted that on Facebook yesterday. But thank you for the question, and I look forward to Brian's response.
Okay, thank you. Brian?
Yeah, well, this is something that's near and dear to me. Obviously, it's the way that I continue to put food on the table, and it's the reason why I'm not in the process of, I am filing for the PPP program to try to keep sort of the roof over our head. To me, I can certainly understand the discomfort with allowing large workforce or large projects to move forward. But that being said, this is one of those pretty complicated issues. I drive down Highland Avenue past the new hospital project. That's what's going to get us more hospital beds, get more people into the process. And I watch the workers walking back from their trucks, not social distancing. And so I'd really like to see best practices enforced a little bit better on construction sites. But by and large, the projects that we're doing can operate under with fewer than 10 people on site. We can slow down and not have multiple crews together. And so, I mean, I think if we think about things like keeping crews from carpooling together, and my understanding was that there was some shared shuttle on that particular project. I don't know that for sure. We can keep 6 feet, 10 feet apart from guys on site. I'm managing to do that quite well with my one helper every single day. And just slow down. I mean, we can continue to not work, but Bozeman and the state on the whole have seen a lot of success in flattening the curve. And so I would say at this point, shutting down more industry and sort of causing additional problems for us in Helena, lack of tax revenue, lack of jobs, more unemployment costs, more social safety net costs. Given where we are in Montana right now, I think the governor has really hit a pretty good balance.
Okay, thank you. You said again. Okay, this is my last question, and then we're going to jump to questions from the audience. House District, and this goes to you, Brian, first. House District 64 contains some of the most rugged, ecologically and recreationally valuable land and waters in the West. With Bozeman's growing population and tourism industry, there's a great deal of pressure on these lands, the wildlife, and the ecosystems. How do you envision managing and protecting our public lands, both in the Matteson and Gallatin ranges and in general?
So I've been a really big advocate of infill development inside Bozeman, of smart growth. And that's a little bit of a dirty word among a lot of the people, or phrase, among a lot of the people that I work with. But I really honestly do believe that number one, we need to give people a place to live. We've got 2,500 graduates coming out of Montana State University every year that most of them would like to stay here. They need apartments, they need houses. They need jobs. And so I think recognizing that pressure doesn't go away just because you want it to is really critical. And so I think the state can do a whole lot of things. There are a lot of levers the state can pull in terms of helping finance infrastructure for infill projects. So our incentives as developers are to do smaller, less infrastructure intensive projects, as opposed to chopping up the countryside with 5-acre ranchettes or 20-acre ranchettes. And I think that again, even though I've got an economic interest in the construction industry, I do shed a little tear every time we go up on a project that's chopped up our access to our state and federal lands. If I'm floating down a river and you see that giant house right up against the banks, that means to me that we're not quite doing something right. And so I think we need to weigh that. We need to know that if we're not taking on big infill projects, that we are going to naturally force that growth somewhere else. And so that's been a passion of mine for a long time, is really that focus on infill and smart growth.
Okay, thanks. Josh?
Well, so House District 64 is 995 square miles of public land. It's 251 square miles of private land. So you're absolutely right in that this district is immensely a public lands district. You know, and I will say that if elected to the legislature, if that number is any less than 995 square miles of public land, I will have failed. It's most of that land is federal land. 100 square miles of that land is Yellowstone National Park, and the state doesn't have many levers to pull on federal land. I will say that if there's any attempt to transfer any of that land to the state as a legislator, I would refuse it. You know, keeping public lands in public hands does not work if you're transferring federal lands to the state, because the state cannot manage land for mixed use the way the federal government does. You know, Brian addressed something that I just want to touch on real quick. And, you know, in Big Sky, there were 1,200 jobs created from 2013 to 2018, while only 877 houses were built. 2/3 of which were over $1 million, and none of which were priced under $1,200 in rent. So yes, we have a problem with people coming to this area and not having a place to live. You know, and that I just am of the opinion that the economic boom that's going on in Gallatin County is a good thing for all of us. It very well may be over for the time being, but you know, we need to prioritize actual affordable housing solutions for people who are coming here, for the 2,500 graduates from MSU every year, and not consider transferring any of our public lands to make room for housing. So that's all I got.
Okay, thank you. When it goes over, then I get all messed up. So I'm sorry with that. We are going to jump to questions from the audience. And I think that Allison is collecting those questions from both Facebook and the chat box on this Zoom webinar. And we'll take those for a few minutes until it's time to do closing statements. Okay, so take it away, Allison. Give us your first question.
Absolutely, thank you. So the first question came from Daniel Carlino, who asked, what can you do on the legislature to guarantee a living wage for Montana workers? What would be an appropriate minimum wage?
Okay, Josh, that goes to you first, and then Brian.
Fantastic. You know, I appreciate the question, Daniel. It's I wish I could find it in my notes right now. I would co-sponsor Marianne Dunwell's $15 an hour minimum wage bill. You know, I'm a big proponent of a $15 minimum wage. I will say that the one exemption I would make to that is servers and bartenders. And they would have a choice. Either they could opt for $15 an hour, and any tips received on that shift would be distributed evenly with everyone who worked on that shift, be they dishwasher or hostess or bartender, barback, you know, so on and so forth. Or they could stay at the current minimum wage level and keep all of their tips and tip out according to however their company policy is. But yeah, I would co-sponsor Mary Ann Dunwell's $15 an hour minimum wage bill on my first day in office.
Thank you. Brian?
I don't have any problem raising the minimum wage. I think there are a lot of places in Montana where a $15 minimum wage is would leave you feeling pretty good about life. In Bozeman, we've got a real, I should say, in Bozeman, in my industry, we've got an effective minimum wage of $15 an hour. There really isn't anybody working in construction that's making less than that. You're making 20 if you're willing to go up to the Yellowstone Club and sweep floors. And I think that's great. I am absolutely 100% in favor of that. I wish more industries would follow that lead. But I would caution, and like I said, I would also support, I'd support raising the minimum wage to 15 an hour. But we need to recognize that one of the implications of having raised wages in the construction industry to that level is that we've pushed housing, the cost of building housing, beyond the reach of a lot of people. And so I just think being cognizant of the very real effects of that, I've got a lot of friends that run restaurants. I'm pretty familiar with what a profit and loss statement looks like for the restaurant industry. And if we go to a $15 hour minimum wage in a restaurant, we will all see that $100 bar tab go up to $115 or $120. And again, I'm in support of that, but I think we need to be aware that that's the real world implication of what will happen, and just be prepared to accept the consequences. I would even say embrace the consequences.
Thank you. Good job. Allison, what's our next question? We'll take one more.
Oh, in that case, we have quite a few more, but I'm gonna make a decision on this next question because there are two people that basically asked a similar question. So Patty Steinmuller and Tom Woods asked a similar question, so I'm gonna kind of combine it. Democrats have come closer to winning House District 64 in the last few election cycles. But we also know that, 64 has a diverse group of constituents with different priorities and value systems. So what is your campaign plan to win the seat? What would you do differently than other campaigns? And how will you talk to constituents with different value sets?
Okay, Brian, you take that first.
I think that's a really good question. It is a very swingy district. Donald Trump won it by about 10 points. Steve Bullock in that 2016 election lost by maybe 300 votes. Denise Albrecht came very close to carrying it in 2018. And she outperformed every other countywide Democrat that ran in that district. And I think Denise did laid out a game plan. I think it's a whole lot of voter outreach. It's a whole lot of contact. And I think it's a whole lot of understanding what people in that district value, what's important. I know a lot of people who have moved from inside Bozeman city limits into Four Corners just to be in the Montforton School District, right? So I think when we talk about the values of education and supporting public education, I think that really, really resonates in the most conservative part of that district. I think when Josh is very passionate about public lands, and I probably haven't expressed that in this particular forum, it's a big deal for me too. I think talking to people that maybe tend to lean a little bit more to the Republican side, I think public lands are a really big deal. Everybody that I know in that district, and several of them are absolutely 100% going to vote a straight Republican ticket, but public lands, protecting the waterways, making sure that they still have clean air, that's really important. And I think the last one, I think talking about jobs, and I think talking about appropriately managing growth resonates in the district as well. So I think when we start talking about those issues, I think we start reaching out to people in that district. I think that I've got a background. I think I've got a campaign message that resonates.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Josh, resetting here. Hold on. Ugh, it's driving me nuts tonight. Okay, Josh, you take it away.
All right. You know, Denise Albrecht came within, she lost by 416 votes. That's the closest it's ever been. You know, I am attempting to approach this district and as a nonpartisan candidate as I can be. You know, yeah, I'm a Democrat. I've been a Democrat. I'm a lifelong Democrat, and I'm a progressive Democrat. But I'm also a fishing guide who owns a gun. It's really hard to put me into a box. You know, I cross a lot of barriers. I've talked to a lot of people. I'm not scared of Trump-loving Republicans because I'm not running for president. I'm running for House District 64. You know, and protecting the Gallatin River is a nonpartisan issue. I'm working on an idea for legislation that would prevent any infrastructure project from going over, under, or into the river. And I don't know if you guys have heard about this issue in Gateway with natural gas pipelines and drilling under the river, but there is a petition that as of today at 5:45 had 4,742 signatures. That's more votes than Kerry White got in 2018. It is an absolutely nonpartisan issue. So, you know, I think I'm not saying Brian's message doesn't resonate. I'm saying mine resonates as well. You know, we have similar stances on a lot of issues, but different stances on certain issues. Responsible development and protecting this river are my top things for the district itself. So thank you for your time, and that's all I got.
Okay, thank you very much. Brian, we're going to go to closings. Well, both of you, we're going to closing statements. And let's see, it's Josh goes first because Brian went first the last time. Okay. And for this, you get 3 minutes, Josh.
You know, I went first in the Senate debate. That should have been what we went off of. All right. Well, thank you to the Gallatin County Democrats for hosting this event tonight and for Elizabeth for moderating. It's been very insightful, and I hope that to everyone who watches that you can see that Brian and I are on the same page of a lot of things, but we differ in certain areas. You know, I'm in this race for one reason. Montana is a hardworking state, and its residents deserve elected representatives who reflect their values. I know there are thousands of Montanans who struggle to pay the bills each month because I've met some of them, I've heard their stories, and I've been one of them. We should demand leadership in our government that represents everyone, not a particular party, ideology, special interest, or single issue. Representatives that are accountable to all but beholden to no one. After all, every voice matters, no more nor less, no less than any other. Our shared experience can bring us together if we elect leaders that unite rather than vilify and divide. As a candidate, I understand that access is our most pressing issue. Not just access to public lands and waterways, but access to affordable and quality healthcare. Access to jobs where you get an honest wage for an honest day's work. Access to affordable housing, and access to high-speed broadband internet, not just for those of wealth and financial means, but for all of us. We all want our access preserved, protected, and increased, including to our elected representatives. My opponents are all supported by wealthy business interests with ulterior motives. The wealthy, the special interest groups, and the well-connected are looking for exclusive access to your elected officials. Mark my words, that will not be me. The folks who support me with no expectation of special treatment. I hope you support me too, and that I can count on your vote this June. Thank you for your time. I look forward to meeting all of you in person when this is over. Until then, stay home, stay safe, stay healthy, and stay in touch with those you love. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Brian, your closing statement.
Thanks, Elizabeth, and thanks, Josh, and thanks to everybody for tuning in. I hope it was a worthwhile endeavor for everybody to watch. I hope it was informative. I know I learned a couple of things in the process. I hope everybody else did too. You know, Montanans have a long tradition of voting for the person, not the party. And I have always thought that's a really important, pragmatic way of approaching things. I think it's particularly important in a relatively conservative district, a place that looks like HD64. You know, ideological solutions aren't going to win an election there. And quite frankly, they're not going to solve any of the problems that are facing Montana, whether it's the financial disaster caused by the coronavirus, fixing affordable housing in Gallatin County, or fixing the jobs crisis in the rural parts of the state. You know, Montana needs solutions that actually work for the vast majority of people across the entire state. And we need people in Helena that can read a balance sheet, can read a profit and loss, and we need those skills in this upcoming year more than we've ever needed them before. We need people that are going to go where the facts, where the data take them. We need leaders who understand that compromising on certain political issues, not the same as sacrificing your values. Anybody who's been a parent or has run a small business knows that we don't get to choose our circumstances. And again, it couldn't be clearer than in the last month. The best that we can do is prepare for the unexpected things that the future is going to throw at us and make the best out of less than perfect circumstances. I think I've got a history of having done that. I think I've got a history of working with a lot of diverse interests in making sure that that happens. That doesn't fit into a neat box, but I think it's central to leadership. And leadership is one thing that's in really short supply in Helena right now. I'm asking for your vote to send some of that pragmatic leadership to Helena in 2021. Thanks.
Thank you so much, both of you. I don't know how everyone else out there feels, but we have two wonderful candidates. I appreciate your time. I appreciate your thoughtful responses. I appreciate everyone that could join us tonight and those who watch online later. And I would say, vote from the bottom up. Vote a straight blue ticket, because with Democrats, you know, you can't go wrong. We're at least going to guide you in the right direction. I would like to remind those of you attending tonight that this is the primary election on June 2nd. Ballots will go out beginning on May 8th. Please mail those up to 1 week ahead so that the Gallatin County Clerk and Recorder can receive those. If they arrive after election day, even the next day, they are not counted. So it has to be there at the courthouse by 8 p.m. For once, it's not mine. Thank you. And do keep in touch with the Gallatin County Democrats for more information on all of the races. Sign up for our newsletters and reach us online, and follow our Facebook and Twitter feeds. Allison, thank you for all your hard work behind the scenes. Thank you to Brian Popiel, Josh Seckinger for running in that district. And thank you everyone for voting. All right, good night. See you on the other side.